Okay, we're all good to go then. So welcome everybody to this Norwich Area Museums Committee meeting being held on the 2nd of December. Can I ask for apologies first, please?
Yes, Chair, we've had apologies from Councillors Brochek, Coulton, Rumsby and Ward.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, can I just check if there are any declarations of interest? And there are none, so we'll move on to item 3, which is the minutes. So for everybody who was there at the meeting held on the 9th of September, hopefully everybody's had time to consider these minutes. Can I check that they are accurate? Everybody's happy with those? Great, thank you very much. The minutes are confirmed. In which case we move on, and I should say we haven't had any public questions or petitions, in which case we move on to item 5 from the overall agenda, which is the Norwich Museum's report for the period covering August to October 2025. Robin, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everybody. The report in front of you covers the period August to October, and I'm going to immediately start by handing over to my colleague Stuart Garner just to say a few words about Section 1, opening arrangements and castle ceremonies.
Thank you, Robin. So, following the handover of the personal section in July 2004, we are now able to access the museum obviously via our new entrance. And that is all going very well. In October of 2024, we also introduced the new automatic access barrier system, which are located in various points around the museum to control access into the paid parts of the museum. We opened full with Norwich Castle Keep coming online from the 7th of August, and all construction hoarding lines were then removed, and we are effectively now able to operate with the full offer as was designed at Norwich Castle. Moving on to Norwich Castle ceremonies, I've changed very slightly the look of the way in which we report the ceremonies so that you can see year on year figures there based on actuals for this year and the 2 previous full years. So far, up to and including the end of October, we've had 486 ceremonies at Norwich Castle, which is slightly down on 2024-25 and 2023-24. But in terms of footfall, which is the second section, we've had an additional 13,007 visitors that were couples and guests associated with those ceremonies, which is a slight increase on last year, but slightly down on 2023-24. The reason for that, having had conversations with colleagues within the Registrar's Department, is largely down to the fact that post-COVID there is a large rush because of the amount of people that had to change their ceremony dates, of course, as a result of the lockdowns. And so 2023-24 specifically was a bumpy year, and what we believe has happened now is we've reached a point where we can think that we will be round a similar figure to what we're achieving now for the long term. But that's the end of my section. Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart. And I'm going to hand over Chair now to Jan Pitman to present the Norwich Learning report. And at the end of the agenda, members will be aware that Jan's also going to be giving the presentation summarising the work on the Norwich Castle activity plan.
Thank you, Robin. Chairman, Councillors. I'm going to give an overview of the activity plan at the end, and as you'll see, we've got quite a bumper report for learning this time, so I will skirt over some things to keep it succinct, but please do ask questions about any of the items. So first of all, thinking about formal learning, the last few months we've been trialling 2 of the events which are focusing in part or wholly upon the castle, so the new spaces. We've had Life in the Castle, Key Stage 1 event, you'll see on page 12 and then on 13. and effectively this is trying to use our spaces for some of our youngest form of visitors, so 4 to 7 year olds, largely, not entirely, year 1s and 2s. So we've created quite an engaging, interactive, what we hope is engaging, but certainly interactive day where they help to prepare the Great Hall for a feast they are with, as it turns out, a rat catcher in the Great Chamber and the chapel. And then they go on this interactive story as they go through from the lower basement spaces, the north and south compartment, and then through into our gallery of medieval life. In that particular case, we're transforming that into a troll's lair, where they're looking for items. It's all about missing men and vomiting rats and things like that. As you can see, some of the engagement, the awe and wonder of being in the Great Hall was mesmerising. The amount of immersive experiences were excellent, added a great dimension to appreciating that this was a castle people lived in. That's exactly what we're trying to do. It's trying to bring it to life and make it accessible to all of our learners. In that sort of way, coming to Key Stage 2 Anglo-Saxons and Vikings, which, as Stuart was just saying, the Anglo-Saxons and Vikings gallery came back relatively recently, so we had to redo our Anglo-Saxons and Vikings event. It's been a long break that it had been closed. And trying to think about creative ways of using our spaces is one of those things that I think is at the heart of keeping things fresh and keeping people engaged. Now, working in galleries is actually very difficult because a lot of the material in there is quite specialist. It takes quite a lot of background knowledge. Finding ways in which we can get any learner to engage is tricky. We've been around the houses with this one, and eventually we thought, and apologies, Robin, Stuart, and Francesca particularly about that, we thought the best way of engaging with our Anglo-Saxon collections was to have a character of a Viking going in there with children looking for things to plunder, which is the reverse of what you would expect. But the fact is it gives them a focus and a purpose for looking for things. And those are the sorts of things, it's a good example of how we're trying to find every way we can to engage. As I said, looking at material culture is problematic, it's difficult, we're trying to find shorthand ways. And again, moving on to page 14, you'll see some of the, it was really interactive, the children really enjoyed acting out the story, it's good to place it into context, excellent opportunity to view new spaces in the castle, complete some practical activities. Again, that's what we're heading, we're aiming at. I should apologise, by the way, despite Robin's best efforts, some of the formatting of the pictures got out. There's just too many pictures in this report, so... as ever, we're encouraging undergraduates to come as much as possible, and you see on page 15 that we welcomed a group of young people to think about how to visit learning outside the classroom, what good practice likes, so that's part of our working with education from UEA. And we've also hosted teacher views of the new art exhibitions, that was Paul Arago and Watercolour Now. Moving on to the visitor programme, as you can imagine, the summer holiday programme was extremely busy with the volume of visitors who were coming on reopening. We had to make choices about how we were going to interact with those, because obviously I think you appreciate with the increase in numbers the way that we can interact as part of school holiday programmes has changed. We can't do as in-depth engagements as we did before because quite simply there's more people, more pressure. And so we made choices to try to accommodate that, and I think we did pretty well over the summer holidays. And we're now, I think we said before about using the family Saturdays and the year Saturdays as a testing ground to see how the activities will work in the school's holidays. And it's working pretty well, I think. If I'll move on to, if I may, 17, to some of our community engagement. On 22nd of October, Maya and Beth and Emma Clark delivered a object handling and immersive tour for Vision Norfolk. Really significant piece of work to try to make sure that we're learning how to use new spaces, and this was a really good way of working with Vision Norfolk to see how we can work with other groups. We just had some feedback today from the group, which is very positive. Always things that we can improve, always things we can change, but I think it worked, and the combination of object handling and exploring the spaces worked efficiently. Moving on to other groups, we've got Knights of the Sound Table. We've mentioned them before there. As you can see on the picture on page 18, they're now trying to publicise using social media and using some of our, I think you've met Snapdragon as one of our early years brands, but they're going to use them as one of the, as a sort of foundation for a social media campaign for young people, to try and find things which might be relevant for young people to bring them into the museum. They're also planning something with Strangers Hall, which is very interesting, I think, piece, which is imagining what it would be like to be LGBTQ+ in the restoration era. That's in work. It would probably be a piece of promenade theatre or promenade experience, something like that. Interesting. 2nd October, we welcomed the Matthew Project. We've been working with Matthew Project for a while, and in October we were welcomed them to, as part of the UCAN project, as you see this page 19, working with a range of different manuscripts and having a go with quill and ink, and exploring in a very gentle way the gallery of medieval life. And again, one of those things that we need to be developing on, we're continuing trying to work in partnership with many different groups, and obviously, as Robin will report on in a minute, working with Kick the Dust, with young people through Kick the Dust Supply. Creative Wellbeing Self-Workshop. Again, that was with the Garage's Creative Wellbeing Project. And then if we move over to page 20, BSL Tours. This is with wonderful Daniel Jennings, who came to deliver 2 BSL tours on oneself, the Common Self exhibition. Other uses, Strangers Hall, the Wayward Adventures. The Wayward Adventures is something that's working with ourselves in Norwich, but also at Gresham Hall as well. And it's particularly tailored to introverted neurodivergent audiences. It's got a strong role-playing, Dungeons & Dragons sort of focus to it, and it's using our collections and settings as inspiration for those. On page 21, one of the last things which we delivered to do with the Keep Activity Plan was Art, Space and Play, which is a really interesting workshop of a combination of professional dancers and allowing visitors to sketch in movement their bodies. Good feedback for it. Again, interesting ways of looking at how we can use our collections as backdrops. And then carrying on page 21, Sustainable Fashion Week, that's working with Ruth Battersby-Took, amongst others. And then on page 22, and this is a sort of comes to something I'll talk about when we talk about the activity plan about Community Culture Club, the project working with people living with dementia. As part of the contacts and partnerships we've developed in that, this Community Psychology Festival is something that was held at the Forum. We were invited to have a presence there. And then, probably more significantly for Rosalind and Susie, as you see at the bottom of page 22, they attended a conference in Sri Lanka as part of that relationship with UEA. It's to do with niche funding. It was obviously fully paid from their funding, which I think they got a lot out of. And as you see from some of the quotes at the bottom, it's really good, I think, to see the work which we've been doing presented on an international stage. So that's been a really important part, I think, of the Keep Activity Plan about what happens if you can support certain areas of work and continue to do so, and the fruits that can have. And I think that probably is enough. If anyone's got any questions, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Jan, for that. Question?
Thank you, Chair. Not so much a question, but I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank Jan for Friday. So on Friday, I was able to tag along to see in person a small aspect of a Key Stage 2 visit and see how the children were learning. And Jan also, we had a good conversation. It was really quite useful to put some of the things we've seen into context, and also to get a tour of the keep, which I hadn't actually visited up until that point. And clearly visits to the keep were a bit like buses, because I then went to the County Council Chairman's reception on Saturday, where we then went to the keep again. But anyway, it was really interesting to see how the children were engaging with the learning. This is with a school that I work with in my day job, and so this is Key Stage 2, but they'd also had a Key Stage 1 group there a couple of weeks beforehand, and when I'd seen the Key Stage 1 teacher a few days before, the reports were absolutely glowing. So it's good to be able to give that feedback about just how well the learning team work, and how their work is seen by teaching practitioners out in the field.
Thank you, Councillor. If I could just say, it was lovely to see you, and if any other councillor is interested in coming to any of our museums, please just drop us a line. We can sort it.
Thank you for that. Just to pick up on Councillor Wright's point, it's great to see such positive feedback through this report as well. Councillor Kidman, next comment.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it was a comment rather than a question, just to comment on, you're right, it's a real bumper edition. It's really great to see that the range of creative education output and how diverse it is, and particularly stood out that children were appreciating the age of the castle. We take it for granted that it's 900 years old, but really heartening to hear that young people are going in and appreciating, perhaps for the first time, that we've got a 900-year-old castle sitting in our midst in the city. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If there are no more comments and questions, Robin, can I hand over to you for the next part of the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. So on page 24, starting there, you've got the hopefully now familiar update on kick dust activity. So there's a lot of content and detail in there, as with previous reports, so I won't go through the detail of it with you this afternoon, but just to pick out a few sort of salient points. So on page 24, just an update on participation numbers. So we're continuing to track really closely levels of participation, so the figures there take you up to the end of September, and you can see since Kick the Dust started its work back in at the end of 2018 through to September of this year, we've now worked with over 6,000 individual young people in just over 19,000 interventions, and we've delivered over 10,000 hours now of activity. What's really encouraging is the fact that over 80% of all of the Kick Dust activity is now designed and led by the young people who participate in the programme. And central to that is our youth board, which draws on young people aged 18 to 25 who've normally been working with Kick Dust over, in some cases, a number of years. And we've got 14 young ambassadors who work at that level, and that involves meeting as a youth board to look at a whole range of different things. Very shortly, they're going to be going on a trip to Sutton to look at the interpretation there, and they've been given some specific tasks by members of the NMS team to sort of feedback on elements of the interpretation that they felt worked strongly for young people and things that could have been better. So a few months ago, that same youth board went down to Cambridge at the invitation of the University Museums, and again were able to sort of look at good practice outside of Norfolk, but also then feedback in terms of us changing our own practice here within Norfolk Museum Service. So that youth board continues to be really productive. As mentioned later in the report, they've also conducted a review of the new interpretation in the castle, and we've already fed that back into the review undertaken by the project team, and some of those sort of findings already starting to influence tweaks and changes we're making to the interpretation. And we're also going to be incorporating some additional content created by in the displays going forward. And the Knights at the Same Table group that Jan mentioned, who meet at the Museum of Norwich, have been really instrumental in creating some really interesting content, including zines and audio and film content that we will be using in the interpretation of the castle, which is fantastic. Actually, yesterday afternoon I chaired the latest meeting of the Kick the Dust steering group. I think we had 7 young people represented in that meeting, and that really highlights the way that young people are now taking a really strong leadership role within Kick the Dust. And one of the young people reported in the meeting that they've just been appointed as a trustee of an independent museum. So absolutely fantastic, and it's what Kick the Dust is all about, giving young people those opportunities to either participate in a one-off activity, that's fine, or work with us over months and years to develop their skills and experience. Page 25 and onwards, there's a little summary of some of the current activity taking place within the various Kick the Dust groups operating across Norfolk, and it is, as members are aware, a sort of a county-wide programme with active Kick the Dust groups in Kings Lynn, in Thetford, Gresson Hall, in Great Yarmouth, and of course here in Norwich, and we're looking to develop a new group up in North Norfolk, centred on Cromer. On page 26, there's reference to the work of the Knights of the Same Table, and also, as I've just been talking about, the involvement of the Youth Board in reviewing the interpretation content at the castle. Again, as reported at previous meetings of this committee, bottom of page 27, an update on the evaluation around young people's mental health and well-being. We're currently seeing around 78% of the young people participating in Kick the Dust reporting that that involvement has a positive impact on their mental health and well-being. We're also tracking how many of the young people working with us identify as neurodivergent, and that's running at about 51% at the moment, which is an interesting statistic. We're continuing to crunch the data provided by Young People's Evaluation using the Warwick Edinburgh scale to track that mental health impact of the programme, and we've provided the dashboard on page 28. We were actually meeting with the County Council's data team this morning, looking at how we can further enhance that evaluation and actually create a live dashboard that we can sort of view in that live environment. So we're continuing to tweak our approach to evaluation, because it's really important that we can demonstrate the impact of what the programme is actually able to achieve. And then from page 30, you've got some updated quotes from the young people who've been involved with Kick the Dust, and this is probably the best way of sort of gauging how the programme is running, the voices of young people themselves. So our acting Kick the Dust coordinator, Tricia Hall, has done a really good job putting together some quotes that give a flavour of how Kick the Dust is meeting some of its priorities. The other thing I wanted to make members aware of is we have now finally published our youth engagement strategy, and I will make sure that a PDF of that strategy is added to the minutes from this meeting. So I'll share that with colleagues here in the City Council. That really sets out our stall in terms of youth engagement priorities over the next 5 years, and Kick the Dust is at the centre of that. So that strategy, which has a forward by the Youth Board and which young people were actively involved in developing, really underlines the service commitment to maintaining our work with young people and continuing to harness the sort of creative energies of all the young people who've developed a relationship with us. Happy to pause there, Chair, for any questions.
Thank you very much, Robin, for that. I have a question or comment from Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Chair. I always look forward to these updates about Kick the Dust. I think it's been an absolutely fabulous initiative since it was brought in many years ago. It's good to see extra funding that's been committed to it for the next few years. And I'm sure that we all of us support the great work that has been achieved through this particular project and the difference it's made to young people's lives in terms of boosting self-confidence, health, well-being, all of that. In your summary at the bottom of page 29, you mention the public health money. I was just interested whether that's going to be used in a particular way, so perhaps if you could comment on that. And also, I think we would also generally welcome the sort of targeted, focused funding towards, Great Yarmouth, Kings Lynn and Thetford as well. And again, I wondered if you could sort of comment further about what benefits that money has brought so far. And finally, on the other page, the next page, page 30, whether there's any updates you may have in terms of support for young people progressing into employment training and further learning opportunities through the Flourish initiative from the County Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy Hawkins. All very interesting questions. In terms of the public health funding, we receive funding through what's known as their cross-cutting programme, which is essentially where they recognise that different parts of the County Council supports public health priorities through their work, and we've had a really close working relationship with public health spanning a number of years actually, and I think this funding, which it was a 3-year agreement running until the end of 24-25, and then it was renewed again for 25-26 and onwards. So I think for me that sort of underlines the value that public health put on Kick the Dust in terms of us being able to evidence the way in which we can contribute to their priorities around young people's mental health and well-being. So I think that funding sort of just underlines the importance of that work and the importance of us being able to evidence the impact of that work, which is where the evaluation is so critical. Public health are also involved in reviewing our youth engagement strategies, so they're a sort of active partner effectively in what we do. And we're regularly reporting into public health teams. In terms of the Arts Council funding, we are currently receiving what's known as National Portfolio Organisation uplift funding from the Arts Council, specifically to support our work around Kick the Dust, and this is focused on the Arts Council's priority places, which in Norfolk are Great Yarmouth, Thetford and Kings Lynn. So that Arts Council funding specifically supports programmes in these locations, but also supports Kick the Dust capacity generally, which clearly delivers work across the county. We don't feel that any parts of the county is sort of losing out effectively, even though we do have that Arts Council money focused on specific locations. As I've mentioned, there are very active groups that we support right here in Norwich and in other parts of Norfolk that aren't categorised as priority places. And that Arts Council funding is linked to our National Portfolio Organisation funding, which has been extended to March 27. We're hoping it's going to be extended for another year beyond that. So we have a bit of a, as you would expect, a bit of a mixed economy with Kick the Dust funding. So the sort of key planks to it are Arts Council and Public Health, but we have in the past, as members know, received funding from National Heritage Fund. We've also received funding from other grant-giving trusts. So that enables us to ensure we can deliver a service across the county wherever young people are based. And then in terms of supporting young people developing sort of particularly work-based skills, skills and experience, we have been for an extended period actually delivering online work experience which provides young people with an opportunity to learn about a whole range of different types of heritage careers, and that includes being able to hear from some of our colleagues within Norfolk Museum Service. It's a programme we are actually reviewing at the moment because we think it has a lot of potential to develop actually, and we're looking at how it can also link into the very regular approaches we get now around providing work experience for school-aged children at an increasingly young age. So we're looking at how we can help kick the dust, if you like, to help sort of signpost young people looking for work experience and then provide them with a range of opportunities over a number of weeks to understand the sorts of jobs that are out there actually within the sort of heritage and cultural sector, and also think about some of the skills and experience that they can develop to give them a chance to secure those jobs. And through other kick the dust activity, we provide those real life experiences to actually build CV, build experience to help put them in a really good position. And I mentioned that lovely example that we shared yesterday in the steering group from the young person who's used their experience of being on the steering group to actually then secure a position as a board member on an independent museum trust. So yeah, we do align very, very closely with Flourish, which is, you know, basically encapsulates the County Council's commitment to young people. We're working increasingly closely with Children's Services, and Sarah Tuff, the Director of Children's Services, has really engaged very strongly with Kick the Dust. Our coordinators just last week spoken to the Early Health and Prevention Board, and we've also spoken to various management teams within Children's Services to raise awareness of opportunities that Kick the Dust provides for some of the young people that they work with. So I think we're sort of very mindful of those opportunities and continuing to build partnership networks to enable us to sort of extend the reach of Kick the Dust.
Just to add to that, briefly, Councillor Watkins, Rosalind Hewitt is learning engagement here. Norwich Museums is just working on a project with Children's Services, focusing very much upon those young people who are not in education. The idea is basically another offering very, very gentle inroads into the range of skills and that are available within museums. So initially it will be a pilot of sort of 4 weeks where they meet different people and also get to have a go at various practical tasks. But the focus of it is very much, we're not so much introducing the cultural and heritage sector as practical experiences and giving them opportunities to have a go at things during those 4 weeks.
Thank you for those responses, Robin, and thank you, Joan. I can speak next.
Thank you. And just to reiterate the comments first, Kick the Dust is an incredible thing. I've worked with the young people, some of the young people, and the people that support them in particular, and I never hear anything but raves about the real, incredible material difference it makes to those young people's lives. I just had a couple of questions on the data on page 27 on target audiences. I was just wondering whether there were groups that you thought were underrepresented, or you felt needed more representation because of that underrepresentation, or because they're vulnerable groups and therefore we want to represent them a little bit more, right? And whether that's shown in your data, or whether there are kind of like plans as to, if that is the case, how that might be dealt with. And just another little thing I was curious about, because obviously we've talked a little bit today and in previous meetings about the things the Museum Services are doing for LGBT people. We've got the stuff with Pride and Queer Norfolk coming up later today. And I just wondered, and again, given the mental health issues that a lot of LGBT plus people have, whether there is a kind of data and representation back within the target audiences.
Thank you. So in terms of the latter question, we do carry out quite extensive evaluation of the young people who complete a very detailed sort of survey. It's optional at the beginning and at the end of their engagement, or if they're working with us over an extended period, for example, as part of a group, that might be something they do on a 6-monthly basis, and subject to sort of GDPR controls. Obviously, we sort of do collect quite a bit of data, and not all of that data makes its way into this report, but it's something we're very mindful of in terms of ensuring that at the end of the day, Kick the Dust remains a programme that's successful for everybody, and it is welcoming to everybody and gives young people the opportunity to, as I mentioned, take control of what they do actually. There's reference in the report to a number of the groups that decided that they'd actually like to explore LGBTQ plus issues, and particular groups like the Teenage History Club based at Ancient House in Thetford have developed a real specialism around that, actually, sort of nationally recognised, in terms of developing engaging activities, whether it's around exhibitions. So they were very keen in an exhibition a couple of years ago looking at the story of Justin Fashanu, because one of the Teenage History Club, who was a Norwich City supporter, but was also engaged in the sort of challenges he'd faced in his life. They've also delivered a range of different sort of activities and events exploring different aspects. So I think we provide the sort of opportunity, if you like, for young people to explore topics that interest them, same with climate change, for example. So for me, that's one of the really positive ways in which Kick the Dust has developed. So it's not us necessarily saying we need to explore this thing or that thing. It's actually young people saying this is what we want to look at, and then what our project work is very good at doing is facilitating that and enabling them to sort of understand how they can explore those topics and then make them accessible, ideally, to a broader audience. So it's very much work in progress, but I think we've got a really interesting track record of young people feeling able to explore some quite difficult issues, and often issues that are very personal to them, but also doing it in a sort of supportive environment, and that sort of social aspect of Kick the Dust for a lot of those young people facing challenges is really important. And groups like Teenage History Club and Knights of the Round Table, they've developed those sort of strong social networks as well as coming together to do interesting stuff. In terms of the target audiences, I think we're always looking to, as I say, make Kick the Dust as inclusive a programme as possible, and going back over the sort of history of these reports, those figures sort of ebb and flow in terms of particularly the partner organisations that we're working with at any given time. So YMCA, for example, we do still work really closely with the YMCA. In the past, we've had participation numbers of pushing 30% of young people coming through the YMCA. That's currently running at about 10%. But that very much depends on where the sort of groups are at any given point. So these percentages do fluctuate. But I think as a sort of team, the project workers and the project coordinator are very alert to making sure that we do offer opportunities to as broad a range of young people as possible, and provide those opportunities for young people who might face barriers that are actually directly connected with some of those scenarios. So yeah, it would be a really interesting exercise, actually, something we could certainly look at to sort of track this going back over the lifespan of Kick the Dust in terms of how that position has changed. But a lot of this depends on the partnerships that we have, and also the attitudes of the young people that we're working with at any given time. Really interesting questions, thank you.
Thank you very much, Robin. I have Councillor Kaiser next.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, you mentioned
Teenage History Club that's now morphed into the Thetford Heritage Collective, which enables them to carry on into their young 20 years old. But their murder mystery on Friday was very well researched, as to going back to 1872 and the links with Elman and Maharaja. And I have to report that the murder victim was in fact blackmailing the local anarchist.
I think Teenage History Club is a really good example of how creative young people can be. So this is the group at Ancient House Museum, and they were running up against the 25-year ceiling for Kick the Dust, and also didn't quite like the moniker of teenage, so they changed to THC, which is fine. So we still know who they are. But that's a group, as Councillor Kybert said, that's been very closely involved in shaping Kick the Dust and pre-exist Kick the Dust actually. They've been around for a very long time. Really great group, really creative, and the murder mystery sounded like it was absolutely fantastic. And our curator, Oliver, was probably really not to be the victim this year.
Thank you very much, Robin. Can I just also note on page 29, it's great to see that 100% of the respondents felt welcomed and respected. Tremendous result there. If there are no more comments or questions, Robin, can I hand back to you the next part of the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. And Stuart's already touched on the reopening of the castle, and I'm sure everybody's very aware of the fact that Norwich Castle has now fully opened for business. So just to remind members that the complete offer, including the keep, opened on the 7th of August. So we didn't have all of August, but certainly a good chunk of the school summer holidays. And I know Stuart will be giving a sort of summary of visitor figures at the end, but just to give you some a little bit more detail around the impact of the reopening of the keep in particular. So from the 7th of August up until the end of November, and these aren't officially audited figures and don't for November include weddings, we've seen now over 130,000 visitors, which is absolutely fantastic. That same period, including all of August, in the last full year before the project in 2019-20, we had about 68,000 visitors, just to give you a feel. So we are absolutely in that initial sort of peak period. We'd always expected to have that initial surge, but what I think we've all been very pleased with is the way in which numbers have sustained. And even in the slightly dog days of November, the weekday attendances between 500 and 600 visitors a day during weekdays, and at weekends of 8 to 1200. So really good numbers that we're really pleased are being sustained. Within that, there were some real highlights. So Heritage Open Day on the 20th of September, which was free admission. We had nearly 4,000 visitors, which is a record in terms of visitor number records being kept that we know about, so that was absolutely fantastic. And we've seen, as referenced in the report, really high numbers during August and into September, and some really interesting media coverage on the back of that. We've been really pleased to see the public reaction. We touched on this in the September meeting, but really encouraging the way in which visitors have engaged with the new spaces, and we've had really good sort of reviews within the sector, sort of underpinning, I think, the quality of the finished offer. We know there's still tweaks to be done, so we're expecting about 6 months' worth of snagging and tweaking, particularly around areas like wayfinding, now that we've got live visitors using the building, all focused on improving the visitor experience, and we're also making some enhancements to the interpretation based on some initial visitor feedback. Our press and marketing teams have been incredibly busy, and I included in the report on page 35 just some of the examples of some of the publicity they've been using. And also to draw members' attention at the bottom of page 35 to a new Museums Pass campaign, which is really trying to promote our season ticket, the Norfolk Museum Pass, as a really cost-effective way of people being able to visit not only the castle but all of our tent sites. And if you hold a Museums Pass, you can come as many times as you like to all tent sites around the service, so it's really good value. Adult Museum Pass is about £45, so it's really good value. And we're trying to signpost as many people as possible to Museum Pass. And the wonderfully named Access All Eras campaign launched a couple of weeks ago. I know its social media targeting was working because I was giving a talk to the Norwich Civic Association, a lunchtime talk, and the chairman contacted me in the evening and said, I've just had a Google about your Access All Eras campaign, which you mentioned at lunchtime. So I thought that's a really good sign if it's popping up on his phone. So that's really sort of promoting not only Museum Pass as a whole, but buying Museum Passes as gifts for Christmas. And then we have another campaign running in the spring, again giving Norwich Castle and the other Norwich sites a push, but also linking into the reopening of Crescent Hall. So there's been a complete rebranding of our Museum Pass offer and some specific campaigns really pushing it in terms of gift giving. And we have seen good levels of Museum Pass sales since we reopened. Obviously for those that buy Museum Pass, it gives really good value in terms of being able to access sites. But it also means we can engage with those people, we can communicate with them, keep them informed about the work that we're doing and events that are coming up. And we'll obviously report to this committee in terms of how that campaign is going. But just to say, so far so good with the castle reopening, really pleased with the visitor feedback. We're working through initial evaluation and making some modest changes and also bedding the operational systems in. But really pleased that we've seen so many visitors coming through the doors. So I'll pause there, Chair, if there's any questions specifically about those.
Thank you very much, Robin, for that. I've got Kensal Rights first.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Robin. I've got a question specifically about the Museums Pass. It is undoubtedly good value and great value, but I suppose if you are a family of 2 adults and 2 children, then you're looking at a one-off cost of £130 or so. I just wonder if any consideration has been given to being able to split that cost over 10 months, say, in the same way that people do with their council tax bill, to enable that to be less of an upfront hit for families. Thank you.
It's a really good question. We've only recently been able to take online payments within a local authority's setting. For some of us that can be quite complicated, so we've navigated that, and I think we're still in the early stages of how we can become a little bit more sophisticated in terms of giving people options around payments. That's a really good question. We're really pleased that we've been able to offer online purchase of Museum Pass at all. So that's been a real achievement, although we're in the 21st century. But that has been complicated, and thanks to a lot of hard work by lots of colleagues, we've made that possible. So I think it is something we will be looking to develop, and obviously we'll be listening very closely to any feedback that we get. Just to remind members that we are aware that even if people buy a Museum Pass, there is a price barrier for some people. We do continue to offer free admission for all those on means tested benefits and any children in that household. So that is a little sort of positive, and we continue to offer targeted free admission, as I've mentioned, on events like Heritage Open Day and the lottery players days. And then our Twilight ticket continues to be really popular, £2.50 if you're coming after 1 o'clock and have a chance to look at temporary exhibitions. But I think it's a really interesting question and something we are actively looking at.
If I could just follow up. As it happens, I was speaking to a teacher yesterday who's about to retire after 25 years in the teaching profession, and they've only just found out that they could have had free access as a teacher to the museum. So I think that's another benefit that does exist as well.
Absolutely right. That's tragic, isn't it? They just found that out. But yes, for those teachers doing research, absolutely they can visit any of our sites free of charge. And all Norfolk school children have free admission to all of our museums, although many schools clearly choose to purchase some additional support, as you would expect. But yeah, that is quite tragic.
I've got Councillor Watkins next.
Thank you very much, Chair. My question really follows on from Councillor Wright's questions and comments. Perhaps sort of following on from that, obviously you said, Robin, that the response has been really great so far, and that's sort of borne out by the visitor numbers that we've had over the last few months, which I think probably exceeded expectations. So it's really good news. So feedback's been pretty much overwhelmingly positive. But has there been any sort of less than positive responses? Obviously, James Wright has referred to the pass and museum pass. Was there anything else that perhaps people have expressed concern about, and perhaps you feel some attention ought to be given to sort of moving forward? Thank you.
I think there was, there was certainly discussion in the media, and it's perfectly fair, around ticket pricing, although I think there was an assumption that our sort of walk-in ticket price of £17 was the standard price, whereas in fact our online pre-sale ticket, which has been proving really popular, is £15.30, and I think we do benchmark really favourably with other comparable sites. So I'm mindful that we do need to generate income to support the work of the service and to maintain the quality and consistency of what we do. You know, it's critical we do generate income from admissions and retail and catering and commercial activity. But admissions income is important, but it's striking balance in terms of addressing those barriers, which I think we've got a good track record of doing. So I think there was some I don't know if pushback is the right term against the pricing, but I think short of being free, I think we would have always seen a little bit of that. But I think we can be really confident that in terms of how our price benchmarks with other attractions is really good value, and the museum pass is really good value, and there are other routes for people, including, as I mentioned, the existing benefit route, and I think that message is getting out. I think the other sort of feedback we had that we were, I guess, anticipating was around wayfinding within the new spaces, and members here, I don't need to tell you that the castle is a really complicated building. Just to keep itself is complicated, and if you add in all the other galleries, all the different levels, it's a challenging building to navigate, even for members of staff who've worked there for many years, and I still sometimes take a wrong turning, as I'm sure many of my colleagues do. So it is a really complicated building, and what we didn't want to do was basically plaster every surface with wayfinding information right at the start. We did include wayfinding information. We did commission a map of the site. A lot of work went into that, and I think once it's only really when you get live visitors in a space, moving around the space in the way that visitors do, which isn't always the way you expect them to, but that's fine. It's their prerogative, and then you can adapt your wayfinding to suit real life. And I think what we've been doing over the last few months, and I was meeting with our design manager this morning, talking about exactly this. We're continuing to sort of tweak the wayfinding, put in additional signage, put in additional directional information. We're now providing a free map to every visitor coming in if they find that useful. So making little tweaks, little changes, all about helping visitors navigate what was always going to be a challenging building. But that's our problem, that's not their problem. So it's our job to try and make that as easy as possible. So we've been doing a lot of members who've been in over the last few months would have noticed, I'm sure, new wayfinding information appearing. But also I think there's it's the critical role of staff, because there's no substitute for any member of staff just sort of spotting you if you're struggling and saying, well, actually, can I help you, or are you a bit lost, or can I point you towards the toilets or the cafe, whatever it is you want to get to. And there's no substitute for that. And I think we've all got very adept, whether we're visitor services staff or any myself and my colleagues walking through the spaces, spotting visitors who might be looking a little bit puzzled and just interacting with them. So there's no substitute for that. But certainly issuing the map guide to visitors free has been really helpful. But it's something I think we'll be continuing to tweak for about 6 months, to be honest. And that's probably, in terms of feedback, one of the sort of most significant themes. And it wasn't a surprise. We had sought to try to mitigate it as much as possible. But it's really only when you get live visitors in a complex building that you really begin to understand how they move around. And sometimes that can be really, it can surprise you. So I think, speaking very personally, I'd always assumed that the busiest parts of the new keep offer would be the recreated spaces and going up to the roof. What really pleasantly surprised me was how incredibly busy the British Museum Partnership Gallery was, and anybody that was there in the summer and September, you could barely squeeze your way in because it was so packed with people of all ages and interests really engaging with the spaces, which I know thrilled our curators to bits. It's great to see, and it shows you should never underestimate your visitors.
Thank you, Robin. I've got Councillor Laws next.
Thank you, Chair. Just a further comment on the museums pass, actually. I have one myself, I can certainly recommend it. Not sure which to declare that as an interest, but it's on my register of interest. And I just echo what's also been said about that in terms of making it as affordable as possible for families. I like the idea of making it a gift thing as well. And I've never tried it, but I wonder if it could be developed in terms of giving you a discount off purchases in the cafe and things like that. But it's certainly a really good idea and well worth developing.
Okay, thank you. If there are no further comments or questions... Oh, Councillor Marks.
Yeah, I just want to say that I feel quite embarrassed. Councillor Laws, that you've got a pass, and I've been using my councillor card this entire time to get me in, and making the most of the free access. So maybe I should be making a donation.
Well, that's what it's there for.
So that's just, Chair, it's a very timely reminder that yes, members of this committee absolutely are very welcome to visit not only Norwich Castle but any of our other sites free of charge. Just show your pass. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just saying, had it for a couple of years, and obviously it works for my wife as well. So parade too much virtue, as it were.
Duly noted. Okay, if we move on to the next part of the report, Robin, I think I'm handing over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So, beginning on bottom page 35 on to page 36, the usual, again, action-packed offering from both the Museum of Norwich and Strangers Hall. Jan commented on the learning team contribution to this report being very comprehensive this time, and that's equally the case, and it always is the case actually with both the Museum of Norwich and Strangers Hall. So both fantastic sites, and the teams that are based there incredibly creative on limited resources in terms of the range of activities they support, but also the level of active participation, whether it's by volunteers or local community groups that make both of those museums such special places. So I won't go through the sort of report in detail, but just to highlight a few things. So Museum of Norwich, top of page 36, as with all Norfolk Museum Service sites, supported this year's Heritage Open Day in September. And Heritage Open Day is now extended over a week, so it's one of these campaigns that seems to inexorably grow. And you'll see that Museum of Norwich had 800 visitors, which is really fantastic for its Heritage Open Day free event. Again, Hannah in the report has given a flavour of the real diversity of events that are running, including Day of the Dead and October Half Term, all sorts of wonderful things, but also some of the more sort of traditional offers, like on page 37, the building history tours. I mean, the Bridewell is an absolutely astonishing building. Huge amount of history, and the tours are always really well subscribed, and I think often fully booked. Not only the sort of above ground building, including the Bridewell prison remains, but also the extraordinary Undercroft. And if any members haven't had the opportunity to visit the Undercroft at Museum of Norwich, I heartily recommend it. And if you contact Hannah, I'm sure she'd be delighted to give you a peek. But that always attracts a lot of interest and quite an extraordinary feature. Partnerships, as members are aware, of Museum of Norwich, a really important part of what they do. They have some really well-established partnerships with a number of organisations, including Art at Work, who are just coming to the end of their latest National Heritage funded project, focusing on the textile industry. So that's detailed on page 38. And again, that partnership with Art at Work is featured in a number of reports. On to page 39, we're just drawing the threads together of the project funded by Unilever to basically mark the contribution that the Coleman's Works made to Norwich over the years. We're very shortly going to be launching a new set of digital resources, which is all around the history of Coleman's. And that will be available through the Norfolk Museum Service website very shortly. We're also going to be installing a digital interactive in the Museum of Norwich, again enabling visitors to explore the history of Coleman's. And I've put in the report the link to the Radio 4 food programme episode that included an interview with Hannah about Coleman's mustard and all things connected to Coleman's. So there'll be some interesting things happening at the Museum of Norwich over the next few months around the celebration of the legacy of Coleman's within the city. It's also been the centenary year for Museum of Norwich, on the back of the centenary of Strangers' Hall, so not to be outdone. And as with so many parts of the work of Museum of Norwich, the Friends of Norwich Museum have been really generous in supporting the centenary activities, as have the Norwich Freemen, just to extend the thanks to both of those organisations. And then going down page 40, again, Strangers' Hall, Bethan Holdridge has provided a really sort of comprehensive update on, again, the really diverse range of activities taking place at Strangers. There's been a piloting of a free garden entry scheme, which is really, I think, targeted at people who live on the doorstep and perhaps weren't aware that there was this extraordinary little oasis right in the heart of the very busy bit of the city. It's always worth just sort of strolling into the garden at Strangers if you go to the site, because it is just, it's a very surprising place considering the environment in which it's sitting. And lovely that some local people have been able to sort of make use of that garden, and you know, it's all part of Strangers' Hall, the Museum of Norwich, playing an active part in the life of the city and the people who live in it. And we're looking to extend that free garden offer going forward. It's a very simple thing we can do, but it's obviously been well received. Including the comment, thank you. I live across the street with no garden, it's a joy to be there. So, likewise, as with Museum of Norwich, the team of Strangers work with a broad range of local groups, and you can see at the bottom of page 41 that Bethan welcomed a group from the City Posts to make sure they were up to speed with everything that was happening at Strangers, and they're clearly really powerful advocates for all of our sites here in Norwich, so really good to welcome them to the lovely Strangers Hall, and continuing to support long-term partnerships with English Plus, and facilitating visits not only to Strangers Hall but to the castle as well. And a lot of the activity at Strangers underpinned by the work of volunteers. So middle of page 42, just a reminder that a lot of what there is to see at Strangers, including the garden, just wouldn't be possible without the huge effort from a really dedicated team of volunteers. So snapshots into the life of Museum Norwich and Strangers. And again, if any members wanted to go and have a look around the sites, have a chat with the curators, please do let us know, and we can happily facilitate that. But they both make a really valuable contribution to civic life in Norwich, alongside the castle. I'll pause there, Chair, before handing over to Francesca.
Thank you very much, Robin, for that. I don't think there are any further comments or questions there. I would just like to underscore your noting on page 40 the very generous support from the Friends of Norwich Museums and the Norwich Freeman as well, and indeed also for the gravel support that was offered to the garden and Strangers. So yes, thank you very much. Okay, sorry, Councillor Kidman.
It's reading about the wet day on the battlements that's made me think of this question. I should have asked it some time ago, so apologies for that. I understand that there was a problem with the opposite end of the castle, with the dungeons, with the mould that was believed to not be serious, other than cause a respiratory irritation. I don't know if this is a good point to raise that question or not. But yeah, I just have, so thank you.
That's one for me, I think. Happy to give a quick update on where we are with the dungeons. You're absolutely right. We previously discovered that we had mould within the dungeons, and we sought the services of an expert in the field who clarified that some of the mould was indeed toxic. And on this expert's advice, we had a decontamination clean of the dungeons, which we hoped would eradicate the mould. Unfortunately, it came back, mainly due to the fact that, of course, being a dungeon, it's very cold and damp, and is the majority of the time. So we effectively had to go back to what we didn't want to do was just say, that's it, we'll have to close the dungeons for every day. And it's very difficult to change the conditions of the dungeons, at least externally. So instead, we sought further advice, and were advised that we would need to use a combination of dehumidification and the installation of some what are effectively commercial grade fans, which we've done, which was not easy because we don't have much in the way of electricity within the dungeons. So first and foremost, we had to get Mr. Building consents and all of the appropriate consents to install these within what is obviously a very historic area of the castle. That we did, and the humidifiers and the fans have been in situ now for about the last 6 weeks, and have had, I'm pleased to say, a really positive impact on the environment. And we have literally just raised an order with the specialist again to come back in to do what will be, we hope, the last decontamination clean. And we're looking for the dungeon tours to come back online somewhere in January is the current plan. So we're not too far away, but it has been, unfortunately, a very, very long road.
Thank you very much for that update. Of course, the committee is still looking forward to a dungeon tour when we're able to get down there. I think I'm handing over to Francesca now for the curatorial update.
Yes, thank you very much, everyone. Norwich curatorial update. As you'll
as Robin has already touched on, even though the keep has now been open for 2 or 3 months, there is still an awful lot of snagging and tweaking to do, and so Dr. Tim Pestle, our Senior Curator of Archaeology, has been quite fully occupied with leading on that. And in addition, of course, everybody wants tours and talks of the new areas, so he's been doing a lot of those as well. And in addition, there has been a funding bid recently to the Wolfson Foundation, which Tim has been leading on, which, if successful, will enable the refurbishment of the Boudica Gallery in the castle, the one on the ground floor, which is one of the older galleries, which was last done in 2000, I believe, and so is really in need of a refresh. But I don't believe we will hear of the outcome of that for some time yet. Otherwise, on the exhibitions front, our Curator of Modern and Contemporary Art, Lisa Newby, has just opened 2 new exhibitions at the castle. She has worked with East Anglian artist Simon Carter to put together, to curate jointly an exhibition for the Timothy Gurney Gallery of an exhibition by 8 contemporary artists called Watercolour Now, and that, as you'll have seen from the illustration, the point of that is to dispel the idea that watercolour is somehow rather tame or old-fashioned medium, and to just show that artists today can create fantastic and unusual works in watercolour which really defy expectations. And if you haven't seen those yet, I urge you to do so. The ones in the picture, which are quite large, the artist concerned, Barbara Nichols, she works at height and drops the paint onto the paper so it bursts out into kind of pools and puddles, and it has this extraordinary kind of organic look. In addition, you will also be aware that the Paula Rago Visions of English Literature exhibition has opened in the Tea Galleries in October. And this is the Hayward Gallery Touring Show, which displays a large group of Rago's extraordinary prints on 3 different themes: nursery rhymes, and the novel Jane Eyre, and the children's novel Peter Pan. And of course her figures are quite unique and extraordinary, and she her work is kind of incredibly unusual. And as we speak, in fact, Lisa is working with the East Anglia Art Fund on the next Tea Galleries exhibition, which will be an open art show entitled In Proximity. And the closing date has just passed for the submissions to the show, and I can now reveal that there have been over 900 entries. So Lisa, together with Eve, are going through all those today to attempt to put together the exhibition. And further on in the future, Lisa will also be working with the Norfolk Contemporary Arts Society on their 70th anniversary exhibition, which will be opening next March, also in the Timothy Gurney Gallery. And moving on, Dr. Georgia Bottinelli, the Curator of Historic Art, she has worked with Lisa and with Simon Carter on the present display in the Watercolour Gallery, and that is a group of historic watercolours, over 50, which have been very largely chosen by the 8 artists working on the Watercolour Now gallery. And each of them have chosen some which particularly speak to them in terms of the possibilities of watercolour technique and its expressiveness and immediacy. They are more traditional uses of watercolour, but each revolutionary in their time, in their own different ways. And moving on. Oh yes, I should also say that the current exhibition of Frederick Sand's portraits in the Coleman project space is due to come down next week, and a new show which is called Life on the Water, New Paintings from the Coleman Bequest, is about to go up there instead. And that is celebrating and commemorating the Coleman family's long-standing support of the castle, and particularly focusing on displays of Norwich school paintings from the Coleman collection, which entered the castle's collection following the death of Sir Timothy in 2021. And all the subject matter is all related to boats and water, since that was a particular favourite of Sir Timothy. And moving on to natural history, Dr. Leanne Melbourne, the Senior Curator of Climate Change and the Dynamic Coast, she has made great inroads into the collections management and documentation backlog of the natural history collections with the help of her team of volunteers and research associates. In the picture, you see a picture of two of the doughty volunteers in the stores with some taxidermy. There's a great deal of kind of delicate, complex manual work involved. And Leanne has a very packed programme. She's working with Joanna Jones, Curator of the Eastern Area Museums at the moment, on an interdisciplinary exhibition which they plan to display in the Tea Galleries in spring 2027. And this is going to be about the interplay between art and nature and how art is used in a variety of ways to help us understand and admire the natural worlds. So that should be a wonderful interdisciplinary exhibition in the grand Norwich Castle tradition. Leanne also works, as you all know, in Chroma at least one day a week, and she's also continuing to work on the lottery-funded project over there about Alfred Saving and the Chroma fossil collections. And she has been working towards a renovation of the education space at the Chroma Museum, which is due to be open in summer 26. And she's also developing a redisplay of the Geology Gallery over there as well. And the rest of Leanne's material is, again, on other sites around the county. Closer to home, Ruth Battersby, Senior Curator of Costume and Textiles, she has been working hard on the reinstatement of her collections back into the Shire Hall stores following the completion of the recent building works there. Much of the collection was off-site at Dressing Hall for quite some time, and so it's a big job to move it all back, which is what's been happening over the last few weeks and couple of months. And while it's all being moved back, she's also supervising cleaning and conservation. And the exhibition that she's working on for next summer is to co-curate with the artist Ian Giles and to put on the first retrospective of the work of the cartoonist, the knitter, LGBTQ activist, teacher and author, Norwich-based David Shenton. And this exhibition is going to be entitled Kindly Ease the Tension. And it will explore many different aspects of LGBTQ plus history. And and it's timed to coincide with Norwich Pride, which obviously David Shenton has been involved with for many years. And Kate Thaxton, the curator of the Norfolk Regimental Museum, she has been focusing on documentation and updating photography on all her object records. And they're currently indexing, she and her volunteers are currently indexing 9 attestation books between 1920 and 1932, each containing over 1,000 soldiers' details and their army service number, thus reducing wear and tear on the actual volumes themselves. And over the next few months, Kate's other main priority will be to update and upgrade the Regimental Museum website. And these updates will include clear information regarding visiting the displays in the castle and access to the archive and reserve collection in the Shire Hall, providing some regimental history, advice for those researching an individual soldier, together with helpful links. This will help with a very heavy load of inquiry, she said, which we get particularly around the Remembrance Day. And it will also showcase examples of work done by students at the Royal Norfolk Regimental Museum. The website was originally set up as part of the New Views project supported by the Norwich Freemen's Charity, encouraging students to use the collection in new and creative ways. And it was always her aim to showcase examples on the site. And in addition, Kate's working on new graphics for the regimental displays in the castle. And some of these she plans to install by Christmas and some by Easter. And finally, I am about to, as of tomorrow, about to go to London to deliver a paper at the Turner 250 conference at Tate Britain, jointly with the curator at Colchester and Ipswich Museums about the 5-year Turner project, which began with our acquisition of Turner's vaulted bridges. And the paper is giving a summary of the project and showing how we curated a whole series of Turner exhibitions in East Anglia. Apart from that, I am planning updates and redisplays for my permanent decorative art galleries and to update some of the catalogues and publications for our shop. And I just recently have fundraised for a new acquisition, about which I believe you should be hearing this weekend. There's a press release going out about it on Friday, so look out for that. That's it.
Great, thank you very much, Francesca, for that. Are there any comments or questions on any of that? Okay, well, could we just wish you well for your delivering your paper tomorrow, in that case. And I think I'm now handing over to Stuart for the visitor numbers.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So we've had a very bumper summer at Norwich Castle. So the numbers for Norwich Castle year to date for this year, financial year, I should say, is 156,000 year to date, which is obviously considerably up on last year, of which we were 75,000 to the same point, and 84,000 on the previous year. We opened Norwich Castle Keep on the 7th of August. So the August figures there you can see a significant increase in numbers from July to August, from 12,000 to 41,000. But bear in mind that it was actually only a 3-week month in terms of the full opening of the offer. To better put into perspective the increase in numbers year on year, if we look at the periods of August to October, which is the last 3 periods reported that the keep has been opened, in both 2023-24 and 2024-25, we had in both years 37,000 visitors for that period. The same period this year, 110,000. So that's a 200% increase on the 2 previous years, which just sort of puts into perspective the volume of visitors that we've processed at Norwich Castle. It's been a really, it's been a really busy and a really interesting period, and as Robin was making reference to earlier, it's enabled us to learn a lot about visitor movement throughout the building and understand the way in which people use the building. So yeah, it's fantastic. It's above what we anticipated to have in that short period of time. But no, we're absolutely thrilled. And I can say that November is also looking very, very strong. So we're still continuing to see very, very high numbers, even going into what is normally our very quiet period. But then just moving on to Museum of Norwich and Strangers Hall. Museum of Norwich, we've had a bit of a dip in visitor numbers this year compared to the previous 2 years, and there's a good reason for that. For the past 2 years, whilst we had the disruption ongoing at Norwich Castle, we actually gave vouchers to all museum visitors at the castle for free entry to the Museum of Norwich. That came to close, obviously, it came to close at the end of 2025, 31st of December 2025. So that is a large reason why one of the main reasons why we're seeing a reduction there. But positively at Strangers Hall, 6,785 visitors year to date, which actually is ahead of both the previous 2 years, and is even more startling given that in the summer of this year we couldn't open for the additional days that we normally would do. That was mainly because of the opening of Norwich Castle and the need, and basically due to capacity and the need to sort of concentrate our efforts at that museum to get it right. But actually, we can expect that normally those numbers would have actually been much higher. So a very, very good year for Strangers Hall, and yeah, I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you very much, Stuart. Are there any questions, comments on the figures there? No, in which case that concludes item 5 of the overall agenda. We now move to reports from the voluntary organisations. Felicity, could I invite you to say anything perhaps on behalf of the Friends of Norwich Museums?
Yes, we're all very thrilled about the castle, and we've been astonished at the wonderful. I particularly love the British Museum gallery. It's just astonishing, and so it's all great thing to have done. We've done 1 or 2 things. I'll just highlight 1 or 2. I think we've got the report I need to send in, but the Museum of Norwich, we were pleased to be able to give some money and support to develop an exhibition about the museum's beginnings and its history of the museum. So we're very pleased to be able to support that. Also, it's wonderful to see that our tapestry, Friends Tapestry, on display at last, and it's looking fine. And I just wanted to say that in the coming year it would be important to promote the FNM now that the castle's been opened. And there are ongoing discussions about the ways of doing this. Clive Slater's book on John Henry Gurney, is being reprinted. And we'd like to promote the FNM through that. There are other things, but I think I'll just close there.
Thank you very much, Felicity, for that. Yes, you've mentioned the tapestry, which is, I think, extremely fine. Thank you very much for that. Delicia, if I could invite you to say anything on behalf of Norfolk Contemporary Art Society, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, and hello, everyone. I wanted just to update you on developments within NCAS. We have a new chair, Selwyn Taylor. We have appointed 4 new trustees. Really exciting prospect to help us promote NCAS further. we've also allocated 2 more small grants in support of a touring exhibition, Being Woman, which was in Dis originally, and it's going to be in the Mandels Gallery in March this year. And we've also supporting From Shangri-La to Chroma, celebrating the work of Derek Greaves, the late Derek Greaves, which will, in association with Corner Art Space, that will try to extend our reach across various areas. But most recently, and Francesca's already alluded to it, we've been working, we had a great meeting with Lisa Newby last week, Simon and I. We made excellent progress in fleshing out a year-long programme to celebrate our 70th anniversary. And we've got some dates. The exhibition starts on the 28th of March next year and finishes on the 28th of February, very neatly, with a private view on the 27th, so we'll be letting you know a little bit more about that. The show will feature 35 works of art that have been funded or part-funded by NCAS, which the castle has acquired on their behalf. And we are now also working on hoping to have a series of associated short talks or twilight talks aimed at multiple audiences, and this will discourse on the art in decades. So we're hoping it will attract a very different audience for each decade, because it starts in the 50s and ends in 2025. And we hope that the show, the exhibition and the talks will prove popular with the public and encourage new audiences to the castle for that. We're also hoping to, some of our talks to coincide with the Norfolk and Norwich festival as well. And finally, we're finalising our normal talks programme for 2026 in association with Norwich University of the Arts and Norwich School. That's it from me.
Thank you very much for that update. That takes us, Councillor Kidman, yes.
Thank you for that, Danusia, and that's really interesting, especially hearing about Derek Greaves. I had the privilege of being taught by him back in, a long time ago. I just wanted to mention one of the benefits of a partnership between yourselves and the museum service is if you become a member of NCAS, the added benefit of free admission to the castle. So I thought that might be, on the back of talking about ticket prices, it might be worth mentioning that.
Thank you very much. Right, if there are no further questions, comments, that takes us to the end of the agenda for today's meeting. Francesca, sorry.
Yes, I just wanted to say, obviously, Amanda Geithner isn't here today because they're going through the submissions for the Open Art Show today. But I should also just say that Amanda told me yesterday she has passed her PhD viva. So she is now Dr. Geithner.
Well, thank you very much for letting us know, and congratulations to the new doctor, as we say. Thank you. Okay, that, as I say, takes us to the end of the agenda for today's meeting. Thank you very much, everybody.